Today's objective: I can find the area or perimeter of an irregular shape by decomposing and applying the formula. So the last 2 days you spent practicing area and perimeter on regular shapes like squares and rectangles. Today our focus is going to be on these irregular shapes. First up, let's do a vocab review. Okay, so this vocab can be found right here in your lesson. It's also going to be in your modules, and there's also a link to all the vocab in your resource page. Okay, so first thing we're going to look at is length and width. Length and width are really important when we're talking about area and perimeter because those are the two pieces that we're going to plug in our formula to solve. So length is how long something is, and width is the measure of how wide something is. So if you look at this shirt, you can see the width and the length of the shirt. Next up, we've got formula. So a formula is a special math rule that shows the relationship between different variables. So two very important formulas that we use when we're learning about area and perimeter are right here. So we've got area equals length times width, and then we also have perimeter equals length plus width plus length plus width. So these are the two formulas that we've been using this week. Next up, we're going to look at square units. So the square units are used to describe area. So we can solve area with a formula, length times width. And in this example, we've got length times width right here. 2 times 4 equals 8 square units. Well, another way we can solve for area here is counting the actual square units. So I could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and get 8 square units. Next up, we've got our two big ones here, area and perimeter. So area is going to be the inside measurement of a figure in square units. So when we're looking at area, we're looking at the inside. Okay? Then when we're looking at perimeter, perimeter is going to be the distance around the outside of a figure. So perimeter is going all the way around our shape. Now our new word for today, we've got rectilinear figures. So a rectilinear figure is a polygon with all right angles. So if you look at the 4 examples in this picture, they all are made up of shapes with right angles. So another word that we're going to use for rectilinear figures is irregular shapes. And the way that we're going to solve for area and perimeter when we're given these irregular shapes is we're actually going to decompose them into multiple shapes. So we're going to decompose them into rectangles or squares so that we can easily solve. Okay, moving on into our modeling problem is our vocab word square units, okay? Because that's For this problem, you're not going to solve, you're just going to watch, okay? Just like in core, how I start with a problem and then we do our second problem in our notebooks together, that's how we're going to do it online too. Mr. Baker's classroom needs some tiles replaced due to water damage. How many 1-foot squares of tile will he need to cover the entire area? So, this question is asking about how many 1-foot square tiles, and when I see 1-foot squares, what comes to mind for me, so I want to know how many tiles he needs to cover the entire area. okay? So when we're looking at area, we are looking at the number of square units inside of an object. Now I'm going to check out the visual they gave me, the picture we see here. This shape is not a square or a rectangle. It looks different than the shapes we've worked with in 4th grade. So this is a perfect example of an irregular shape or a rectilinear figure. So let's take a look at our anchor chart to see how to solve. My first step tells me to draw a visual. So this problem already gives me a picture, so I do not need to redraw it. My second step tells me to label all dimensions. So this picture doesn't give me any dimensions at all, so I need to figure them out myself. Well, something cool about this picture is it looks like it's drawn right on graph paper or grid paper. So what I can do is I can count the square units to find my dimensions or to find my length and width. So my formula for area, length times width, only applies to squares and rectangles. So to find the area of this irregular shape, I need to decompose it into rectangles or squares. So when we look at this shape, I could figure out a few different ways to decompose it. The way I'm going to decompose it is I'm going to break it into a rectangle here, and a square here. Okay, now I'm going to go through and label these dimensions. So first with my rectangle, I see I've got 2 square units here. So my dimensions are going to be 2 and 2. Okay, now looking at the length, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares long. So I've got 5 on each side. Now I'm going to look at my square. I've got 2 squares on each side because this is a square. Okay. Now I've got my shape decomposed and I've got all of my dimensions labeled. So now we're ready to move on to my next step. Next up, I want to write a statement to see what I'm solving for. My final question asks me how many 1-foot squares of tiles will he need to cover the entire area. So for my answer statement, I'm going to write he needs blank square tiles to cover the area. Next, we're ready to move on to step 4. We need to write our formula and plug in the numbers. So for this problem, we broke our shape into 2 different shapes. So we're going to need to write the area formula twice. So I've got area equals length times width. And I'm going to need to do it a second time for my square. Area equals length times width. So now we can go ahead and plug those dimensions in. So first we're going to look at my rectangle. I'm going to solve for area. So I plug in my dimensions. My length is 5 and my width is 2. So 5 times 2 is 10. The area for my rectangle is equal to 10 square units. Okay, now moving on to our square. My length is 2 and my width is also 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So I've got 2 different areas here now. The area for my rectangle and the area for my square. So last thing I need to do is just add those two together to find my final area. 10 plus 4 equals 14. So we need 14 square units or 14 tiles to cover the entire area. So since this shape was given to us on graph paper with all of the square units already drawn out, another way we could have solved this was by just counting the square units. So we can check our work by doing that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So again, we've got 14 square units. Okay, we are finished with our modeling problem, so we are ready to move into the we do. That means I'm going to do another problem with you, so you need to get out your paper and pencil and get ready to solve the next one with me.